said, was it a perfect show? I don't think we'll ever get a perfect show. And I think it's Star Wars fans' fault we won't get a perfect show. I think that people in this fandom love Star Wars like more than they love a lot of things in life. But the downside of that is everybody kind of has their own idea of what Star Wars is, right? What's up, everybody, and welcome to the first ever wrap up. I'm your host, Nick from Park Hopping Duo. Crystal is not with me today. I don't know why, but she's just not. We have two special guests on our very first ever episode. Our good friend Q and our good friend Rudio, both two huge Star Wars fans, two of the biggest I know. Probably the two people I would text. Probably two of the people I would text first as soon as an episode comes out of either, Book of Boba Fett, Mandalorian, and now, of course, we're going to be talking about Obi-Wan's series. So, Q, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and let the people know where they can find you?
Yeah, so it's Nick. My name's Q. I've been a Star Wars fan for as long as I can remember. Actually, the first movie I remember seeing in the theater was Empire Strikes Back. So that, for me, is kind of where it all started. It's also why Vader's like my guy, like since that point, you know what I mean? Because that's like his movie. And so it started there and moved up to now. And if you're interested in seeing more of my stuff, I'm Q's Trips on Instagram. Just look me up there.
All right, awesome. Thanks. First Star Wars film. Dang, that brings back memories. My first one, I've actually only seen A New Hope in theaters as far as like the original trilogy goes. When they did the re-release special editions, I got my dad to take me, but he wouldn't take me to see Empire and Return of the Jedi because he'd seen them a million times and we had him at home. So if they ever re-release those, I will be like watching those for sure. Kick it down to Rudio, man. Introduce yourself. Tell them where they can find you.
Yo, what's up, everybody? My name is Rudio. Just like you, huge Star Wars fan. My introduction to Star Wars was actually Star Tours. So going on Star Tours when I was like so little, I'm pretty sure I was like barely at the minimum height. And then going home and then watching A New Hope, and then my parents explaining like, this is what Star Tours is based out of. I'm like, there's a Star Tours movie? And so, and then I bought the original trilogy on the VHSs. Like, I remember when the Leonard Maltin ones came out, like in 95, 96. And then a year later, the special editions came out in theaters. And I remember my mom, like, saying, we're going to go watch some dumb movie, and you guys are going to go watch Star Wars with your cousins. I was like, yeah. And I remember, like, everybody making a big old deal that the Jabba scene was in there. And I didn't know, like, the significance of that, like, Jabba the Hutt being inputted into A New Hope. But, like, I remember just being in the energy, like, I was, like, thinking about it, I was like, man, this is a sold-out theater. And these are all people who love the same movie like I do. So it's just, that was a cool experience to feel at, like, 8 or 9. And then seeing the prequels and the sequel trilogy in theaters, like, there's nothing like it being in the theater with the other Star Wars fans. So
that's for sure.
It's a pleasure to be here with two other Star Wars fans right now.
Heck yeah. Well, thank you guys for being on the show. I'll have links in the description to your guys' pages. That way people can check you out and follow along. Let's just jump right into it. First of all, I got, Rudio's got his squished on the back. I got my Boba Fett Tiki mug. We're ready to go. Let's just jump into it. Let's do a non-spoiler for the people who haven't finished the series yet. Let's do like a non-spoiler thoughts and overview. I'll just start, I guess. I loved it overall. I think the show hit a lot of the right tones. I wish we got more than 6 episodes, I'll be honest, or 6 like consistently 50-minute episodes or something like that. But overall, I think the show did what it set out to accomplish and kind of fill that gap. And there's a couple things that I definitely wasn't expecting that we'll probably get into when we do the spoiler talk. But what about you guys?
So I liked it a lot. I thought it was really good. I think that there are a couple of things which, when we get into like the spoiler stuff, I'll mention that kind of kept it from being great for me. But I thought that overall, I think that it did a lot to kind of fill in stuff I think that I didn't really know that I wanted to know about, and kind of gave a little bit more depth to the series overall.
Same with you guys. I really liked it a lot. The fact that we didn't particularly need this series, but it came at kind of like the perfect time, as far as we just got the Mandalorian, we got the Book of Boba Fett, and now getting reintroduced to the prequel characters, which we haven't seen in a very long time. We haven't seen since Revenge of the Sith. And then getting in that time frame between Revenge of the Sith into A New Hope. The last time we'd been in that time frame was Rogue One, and I enjoyed myself during Rogue One. And to get back into that same sequence, that same part of the timeline, was kind of a thrill. When I was younger, I didn't really like the prequels, but as time went on, as the animated series kept going on, I was like, you know what? I need to go and revisit them. So literally right before Obi-Wan came out, and I revisited all of them in one night. Just
oh dang,
yeah. And I mean, granted, it was a different time. Those actors were acting behind green screen, and they didn't know how to react to certain things. But now with the technology, the volume over at the soundstage, they're actually able to see the visuals around them. So with that being said, where we're at with Lucasfilm and Deborah Chow, I think she did a great job with what she was given. Ewan McGregor and Anakin did an amazing job as far as bringing those characters back to life, and the new additions, all the new characters and the new actors that are now in this universe. I think they all did a spectacular job. Was it a perfect show? Not necessarily. And I don't think we're ever going to get a perfect Star Wars show. I don't think that exists, or if it does, we haven't seen it yet, and it's going to take a few more shows down the line. But for myself, I enjoyed the show. It was a fun ride. 6 episodes wasn't enough. Also,
right.
It could have been a movie. It could have been a movie in my eyes, but
and that's a great comment. I want to just piggyback off 2 things you said, Rudio. Is you said, was it a perfect show? I don't think we'll ever get a perfect show, and I think it's Star Wars fans' fault we won't get a perfect show. I think that people in this fandom love Star Wars like more than they love a lot of things in life. But the downside of that is everybody kind of has their own idea of what Star Wars is, right? So there was some great parts in this show. I actually still feel like Mandalorian season 1 or 2 are like the best live action Star Wars we've gotten almost ever, except maybe the originals, just because of the nostalgia of them, right? Because the originals definitely aren't perfect either. But they have they were like first of its kind and stuff like that. So I would say that the Mandalorian season 1 or 2 are still like top tier. But yeah, they really did do a great job. There was a couple episodes where there was like a little bit too much Scooby-Dooing for me. And we'll get into that later. I know exactly, you guys know exactly what scene I'm talking about. But yeah, I really did enjoy it overall, and think that even if it's not a series we needed, it was something that like everybody's been asking for forever. And just to be able to get Ewan McGregor back in a role he loved, Hayden Christensen back as Anakin isn't something I know I needed, and have him in the Vader costume. But it really did make a difference, I think. And what I want to put out to there is, Rudio said I would have loved it to have a movie. I mean, technically we got longer than a movie, but do you guys feel like one movie would have been enough to tell the story in a different way over than 6 episodes? What do you guys think?
I think so. I think a movie actually would have probably serviced it better, to be perfectly honest, because there is a tendency sometimes when you're doing a TV show to kind of pad it out a little bit just to fill the 6 episodes.
Yeah.
And I think that I think it would have made it have to be a little bit more constrained in the storytelling. And so they would have had to only include the essential stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that there are a couple of scenes specifically I could think of that probably weren't really necessary, and you probably could have gotten rid of and then made it like flow a little better, I think.
Yeah.
Especially because you mentioned like the Mandalorian in that first season. And I think part of the reason why that works better as a TV show versus a movie is that each episode was kind of like its own little mini self-contained story, versus this was telling one long story. And there were definitely parts where you could feel that they kind of needed to get it to 6 episodes. I mean, one of the episodes was only like 30 minutes.
Right.
And so that definitely felt like, oh, well, this is just a filler because we said 6, we can't do 5, we can't do 4. So, I think a movie actually, I think might have serviced it a lot better because you would have gotten only the essentials. And I think, I'll phrase it this way. I think some of the nitpicks that people had, some are valid, some aren't. I think some of the nitpicks people had probably wouldn't have been there because you wouldn't have had to fill that much time and throwing that stuff in there just to add it.
Yeah, I think you're like pretty on the nail about that. I think that a lot of episode 3 and 4 could have been condensed.
Mm-hmm.
And we can talk about it in the spoilery part, but there's an entire scene where I think they could actually just cut most of it, and that would have pretty much reduced most of that episode to it didn't serve anything,
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
cool. So
well, I'll go more on the TV aspect, maybe just on the technical side. There was some episodes, and you have to understand the storyline of that. It's Obi-Wan, and he's trying to hide from the Empire and Darth Vader. And because I explained earlier, the volume, the sets aren't really that elaborate to be as part of a movie. So, like, he's only really in a few settings in this show. So he's in Tatooine. He's on that other planet where they go and kidnap so-and-so, and the ship, and then the other planet where the planet's at, and then maybe one other planet after that. So, like, the sets aren't that elaborate as if it would be a movie, but maybe you have to remind yourself, Disney Plus shows, they're only given so much of a budget, and we've seen that in the Marvel shows too. You can definitely see that they're not giving the scale as far as the cinematic. They try their best, but I mean, they do what they can do.
Yeah, agreed. I think that the volume is like an amazing tool when it's used right. But I do worry about them trying to use it so often that they try to squish every scene into the volume. And there was some talk I saw online about some scenes looking too empty. And I think that was a constraint of the size of the volume. You can only get so many people in Stormtrooper gear to fit in a scene within the volume. And I do think that budgetary allowed them to kept them constrained to that, rather than, okay, we're going to use 20 full Stormtroopers here and then CG the rest, right? Because obviously, like you said, it's a Disney Plus show. We're not going to get a $200 million budget. And does it necessarily need it? Probably not, right? But there are certain times, like let's say if we did a show that took place on Coruscant, right? Like, let's just say in the future we get a Coruscant-based show. I feel like the volume may be a limitation to that show because this is a city that's bustling and it's going to need background characters and hundreds of things on the screen at once, or else it just is going to kind of like they were able to nail that in the prequels, and the prequels look fake and shiny. So if they don't nail it with the volume, I think that will have some, like, I don't know, it just won't look quite right. And I do think that some scenes in this suffered from that, especially in like Imperial space, Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay, cool. So let's jump into a spoiler part here. So overall, before we jump into that, what is this if you're a Star Wars fan, a moderate Star Wars fan, you like it, you've seen the movies, I'm not even going to say you watched Rebels and Clone Wars, is this a must watch for you if you're a moderate Star Wars fan?
I think so. I think at least, yes, because I think that there is enough significant enhancements to the relationship between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader that I think that so my daughters and I, we just are kind of working our way through all the movies. We actually stopped right at Empire. And so I think that, you see that confrontation between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader in A New Hope. And I think if you didn't watch this, the jump from Anakin at the end of the prequels to A New Hope just does kind of feel like it just feels like it comes out of nowhere a little bit. And so I think that it does add like a nice little meaty chunk in the middle without kind of going through and erasing anything on either side.
What about you, Rudy? A must watch?
I agree with I agree with Q. It's a fun watch. For somebody who's, if I were to say a casual fan who maybe just watches The Mandalorian and like they only watch for Grogu, or they watched
Yeah.
the prequels when they were a kid or anything, like this is a fun show to watch. This is episodic in a way where we're going from adventure to drama to a little bit of comedy. It's got a little bit of everything in there. The comedy, you kind of have to look for it if you're a Star Wars fan, because it's like little quips here and there. It's like, oh, he said it, or I get that reference. But yeah, I enjoyed myself all 6 episodes. It's paced actually beautifully to where it's like there's nothing where it just drags on and you're like, oh, like come on, like let's keep, like, it actually moves at a very good pace for 6 episodes, because sometimes Star Wars shows or Star Wars movies, they can drag on. Episode 2. And I mean, like, I enjoyed myself each episode. It brought its own little flavor for every time you got a new episode on those Wednesday nights. And I mean, granted, they've told their story. Deborah Chow, Ewan McGregor, they've told their story. If there's a continuation, so be it. But like, if they said like this is it, limited series, we're done, like I can definitely say like, yo, watch this. This would be pivotal if you were watching the prequels going into the original saga for the first time. This would be fundamental viewing in my eyes.
All right.
Yeah, I think to kind of sorry, Nick. I think to kind of piggyback off of that, I think a good contrast between it is like, say, like Book of Boba Fett. I don't know if like all of that is necessary viewing. I think you can watch like the last like half of it and just be fine. Yeah. But if you contrast the two, Kenobi does seem like it's much more like something that a Star Wars fan should really dive into. They get a lot more out of it, I think. Like if you look at it against like Book of Boba Fett, which is kind of about the same length, kind of about like the same thing about one character, their journey, that kind of thing. I feel like Kenobi kind of hit that a little bit stronger than like Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, especially when you guys mentioned The Mandalorian season 1 and 2. While there is like obviously an overarching story for those series, they are very much hero for hire, episode by episode, right? Or monster of the week kind of settings. And that works very well, I think, in an episodic format, right? But then you had Book of Boba Fett, which didn't really do that. It tried to tell an overall arcing story, much like Kenobi did, like Obi-Wan did. But I didn't land the emotional notes that Obi-Wan did. I think you get some really good emotional notes spread throughout this series, and it's like it starts right in the first episode, and then somewhere in the midpoint, you really figure out where Obi-Wan is at mentally right now. And then at the end, it ends in the way you would expect it to. And I agree. If we get a series 2, cool. I don't need it. I'm good. I think they told the story, and they got, to me, they pushed Obi-Wan to where he needs to be mentally and physically, kind of to be in a space to start a new hope, right? To where we see him before, other than not nearly looking old enough, which is fine. That's just the way it is. But yeah, I'd say you gotta watch this. Like, you gotta. All right. Well, I hope you guys enjoy us talking spoiler free. We are going to jump into spoilers. So this is your warning. If you have not finished the show, if you haven't finished the series, leave a like, leave a comment, and come back later and finish this. Don't not come back. You better come back. All right. All right. So let's jump into spoilers. There was some really good stuff happening in the series, and I would say, for me, right off the bat, dude, I don't know if I wasn't reading the right leaks or the right like rumors. I was not expecting Leia. Like, that came out of left field for me.
That was a Grogu situation. That was absolutely, we're keeping this under wraps.
Yeah.
We're only showing Luke in the teaser trailers, mm-hmm. And you're going to believe that Luke is going to be what Obi-Wan has to protect, but then it takes you to that planet where she's living with Jimmy Smits, and you're like, Leia? Like, right. We're getting little Leia? And that was a cool little twist. Like, to me, I'm glad that they kept it under wraps, and the actress, the little girl who plays her, just like, great. She carried the essence of Carrie so well, and even elements of Natalie Portman's Padme. She carried both of them really well, and you can definitely tell within the costuming they pay little tributes to both Leia and Padme. Even in the last episode with the little holster, it's adorable. But like the way he carried herself is just it was magnificent. It was really something special to watch.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting that they went with Leia, because I think that they avoided, I think, a trap. I think that some people were maybe worried about going into this show of, this, it would have been the like 4th season of a Star Wars show set completely on Tatooine. And I think that would have been like, did you not have the budget to do anything else? Or
is that all you can make look good is Tatooine? Like,
exactly. And so I think that was like a nice surprise, especially because then at that point it allowed you to kind of branch off and see more of the galaxy and see kind of what else is going on around. I mean, I know this is jumping ahead a little bit, but even like that shot of the clone trooper vet who's like down on his luck on that planet and just kind of like out of work, you wouldn't be able to really do that like if you had just stuck with Tatooine and Luke. So by bringing in Leia, you are able to kind of see what more of this world is looking like at this point. You know what I mean?
Right,
so It really kind of opened up the story quite a bit.
And anytime we can get back to Alderaan for a little bit, I mean, we never, it looks good in a million pieces, but it's nice to see it, put together, I know for me, when I heard about this show and, we got the cute little scene of like Luke pod racing or something, my biggest concern was, while Luke knew who old Ben was, they didn't seem from the original movie that they really had a real like relationship. So I was like, well, how do they tell a compelling, like, emotional narrative and he doesn't even get to meet Luke? Is he just like always in the shadows watching Luke, like stopping Tusken Raiders and Jawas from messing with him or something? Like, so I was worried about that. And I think that they switched it on us and none of us had any expectation it was going to be about Leia. And, you guys were talking about her performance. I think she nailed it too. She was the right amount of annoying and bratty to be that age of a child, 10 years old, but also you could see how she grows into become like the Princess Leia we know through the films. And you could see like the resilience and strength of Padme there. They really did a good job with it, minus the very Scooby-Doo fumbled of kidnapping her. I thought that was a little ridiculous. I thought that those adults were made to look a fool, a little bit. But yeah, overall, really great.
Well, when you send Flea to go do it, I don't know if Flea's the right guy to go and like, kidnap Princess Leia.
The one complaint I've heard about the Leia storyline is that in New Hope, when Ben and the crew, or Ben, Luke, Han, and Chewie go save her, is that she doesn't like have any like sort of emotion when she sees Obi-Wan on the Death Star. And you have to remind yourself, like, it's been a while since they've seen each other, because they tell each other at the end, like, we can't have any communication. It's just too dangerous for us to be communicating. So it's kind of like somebody said it really well. It's like, imagine the 10-year-old self that you are, and then you see your dad's work friend like 10 years later, but it's just you them. You're like, are you going to have the same approach that you had when you were 10 years old? Because you were just so little and you only remember so much of them. You're obviously calling for help, but it's like, I don't know who you are 10 years later. You kind of have to have a reconnection. So like that complaint is kind of like, I don't have a problem with it. And also it was 1977. 1977, did they think they were going to make an Obi-Wan show in 2022? No. So
George was.
I think
George didn't
he's
think he's going to make a sequel. He didn't even know he's going to be able to make a sequel. So, yeah. I think that those are just really bad nitpicks. Yeah. But you're right. I mean, you figure, she's 10 years old. She's what? Luke and Leia are 18 in the original trilogy, 19. Mm-hmm. So it's going to have been 8 or 9 years, basically, before she even sees him again. So, yeah, I think it makes perfect sense,
I agree. And I think that, like, I think he made enough of an impact on her life and on Luke's life that it actually kind of helps smooth out why they chose to name her son Ben.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
It kind of fixed that. It kind of fixed
yeah, because it does seem kind of weird, like when you get to like the sequel trilogy and you're just seeing it and it's like, why did Leia pick Ben? Like, because she saw him for like 10 minutes on the Death Star, and so now she names her son after him. Seems weird, but at least I think if anything, it fixes a continuity thing.
Yeah,
showing why she like had such admiration and respect for this guy.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Let's talk about Reva a little bit. So obviously we all know about the fan backlash, right? I'm just saying fan, but these people aren't fans, so let's not call them fans. We know about the backlash to her acting, to her casting, people calling her a terrible actress. I mean, what did you guys think of Reva?
I don't know where all of that criticism of her, like the actress and I think that there are valid criticisms of the way the character was written, but I think criticisms of the actress and the way that she was portraying the character are really kind of odd, and they don't really there's no validity. It kind of speaks more to who you are if your problems with the actress and the character just being in existence. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like that. I'll just say it now. The way that the finale played out for me is part of the reason why I say the show was good but not great. And some of the things that they did with her at the end kind of are part of that, but it has nothing to do with the actress or the character. It's just more of just like, the writing around it. But yeah, it was just really odd to like signal her out specifically. It just didn't make any sense.
Yeah. I definitely will say I liked some of the ideas of her character. I liked her as an actress. I think she was great. I enjoyed her performance. And I think the over the top like zealotsy she kind of showed, like to catch Obi-Wan and it comes down once they reveal that she's really like after Vader, right? She's not trying to be Vader's right hand. She's trying to get close to be able to strike him down. And it makes sense that she'd want to get Kenobi. And it makes sense that she'd have to basically, you think about Force users, right? And this might be going like, I'm probably overthinking it, but you think about Force users and the amount of emotion you can feel from each other, right? And so, of course, she's over the top, filled with rage. That's probably the only way she can hide how much she personally hates Vader for what he did to her life, right? Is like she's directing that rage everywhere but at him to keep her motives hidden. And it's very clear in episode 5 that didn't work, right?
Right.
Like he's known the whole time exactly who she is and has enjoyed like playing into that, I'm sure,
And I think it's just hard to watch episode 5 and see, I think most people kind of like assume that she was like a youngling, from like after watching the first couple episodes and everything. But I think it's hard to watch episode 5 and see, that confirmation, what her goals are, what her motivations are. They added a lot of depth in episode 5 to her character, and the way that the actress portrayed it, I think did such a stellar job of kind of selling all that. So it's really odd to say that the character as a whole is kind of a waste. You know what I mean? Because I think she did play a good role in this. I just wish they would have written her as well in the last episode.
Same. I mean, to me, she did as good of a job as you could with that character, the way it was written. I actually got to see her at Star Wars Celebration. She was on the Celebration stage where they were interviewing different cast members throughout the day for YouTube. And I don't know. I mean, a lot of eyes are watching that show. A lot of Star Wars fans who aren't able to go to the convention are watching it. And they asked her a pretty interesting question. They said, what is your favorite movie out of Star Wars cinematic releases? And she said, I never watch a Star Wars movie. And to me, I don't know if I would ever admit that if I was casted in a Star Wars movie. Or like, I would kind of fake it till you make it. Be like, you know what? I like Force Awakens. Like, you've gotten this far. Like, how have you kind of not watched a Star Wars movie and you've been casted in one? But like, granted, that's a PR issue. That's something somebody should have told her prior. And I think that's maybe that's just an element of the backlash of why she probably got a little bit of that feedback on social media. As far as the character, I sort of like her further along. Like Q said, by episode 5, you definitely feel there's a depth to her. Like we're there. Like we understand why she's just full of rage. My problem is, and maybe you guys have the same issue, is that did she get stabbed twice in the stomach? Once as a Padawan, and then in episode 5?
I personally took it as her just becoming that little girl again, like, and feeling it. I don't feel like Vader actually stabbed her. I don't know.
Okay. But she did get stabbed in episode 5, right?
For sure. Yeah, Vader stabbed her for sure.
Yeah, like all the way through.
Yeah,
like that's the same way Qui-Gon died.
Yeah,
like
Qui-Gon was more in the chest though. If you watch it, his was higher up.
And it's also like the same way that like Han died too, like in Force Awakens. So like apparently she's lightsaber proof or something. That was my like biggest thing is that you'd stab her in the arm, stab her in the leg. You know what I mean? You could have done something a little less dramatic maybe, but still would have like got the point across.
Yeah.
And I think it would have fixed for me the end part of it. Because it was just odd that like she got straight up stabbed at least once, you know what I mean, in the stomach. I thought she was stabbed like when she was younger too, and then she's still like walking around. So it just felt like that's a little odd, and it kind of really like bumped me like quite a bit the rest of the episode.
And I think she's walking with kind of like a weird choice.
Yeah, she's walking with a little limp around Tatooine. Like you could definitely tell her mobility isn't as like broad and strong as it was in the first 4 episodes when she's on Tatooine.
Well, Owen definitely hits her where she's hurt too. Like he gets her right where she's hurt. But I mean, I think what makes that even sillier is like that's fine. It cauterizes. You're not going to bleed to death. Let's just assume you missed all the vital organs. But it's like you pulled that in the 2nd episode too, where she kills the Grand Inquisitor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's like, can you get away with that twice in the? I felt like at that point it's kind of corny. Like, you know, we've all seen Rebels. We knew the Grand Inquisitor wasn't dead, right? Unless they have a clone of him or some really bogus, over the top way of bringing him back. So, you know, we've seen it with Fennec Shan too. Like she got blasted through the midsection and lived, right? But I don't know. I kind of feel like it was a little. Like you said, maybe just cut a limb off or injure her in another way, right? You know, personally, I enjoyed the character. I didn't enjoy the end of her arc. I think that one of 2 things should have happened. I think we should have shown Obi-Wan like willing to end a life to save Luke. You know, like really being like down for that. Or 2, and more importantly, I think Vader should have struck her down. I think that like it's hard for me to have like read the Vader comics that are canon and to have played Jedi Fallen Order, which is also canon, and he did not stand for the insubordination of his Inquisitors. And at the end of Jedi Fallen Order, he even strikes an Inquisitor down who didn't even fully turn to the light side or try to murder him. She just kind of wavered, and he ended her, you know? So I kind of feel like that was a weird choice. And then to not have her character go on to do anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was actually thinking a lot about it because it like you said, like that, it seemed like the whole intent behind 5 was to tie Vader into that kind of person where he would just kill her basically outright and then die. So it felt like they wanted her to be alive for the redemption arc.
Right.
And I think like, if you're going to accept the throwaway line that they had in the last episode of, well, you know, your revenge and makes the dark side powerful and keeps you alive, which is basically the Grand Inquisitor's kind of way of saying like that's how he survived or whatever.
Right. That's how Maul survived being cut in half. And
I think it would have made a much more powerful statement if her rage kept her alive. Once she's decided not to give into it and save Luke, then she died at that point because that her rage was gone and dissipated, I think it would have made a much stronger statement there.
Right.
And so I think that the writers kind of decided to engage in the rule of cool from like, those tropes that like, they thought it would be cool if like she got stabbed, but then still survived to keep on going rather than kind of thinking it all the way through. Like I said, it's a shame too, because it was like, it's the one thing I think that would keep the finale from being like perfect. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so it's just that's the disappointing part of it for me.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Plus, honestly, are either of you guys sick of every dark side user has to have a redemption arc? Like, can't some people just be on the dark side? Like,
because even what was the one before that? Before Fallen Order, or Battlefront 2? Battlefront 2 leads into Force Awakens, and it's the same sort of story. It's the fact that these people who were part of the Empire are just suddenly now, oh yeah, we're done. It's a life of the past. I'm like,
right.
I mean,
it's not really how it works.
Stand for something, you know?
Yeah. It's like the only guy that really believes in it is Palpatine, and everyone else is just kind of like going along for the ride.
Right.
Exactly.
Even stepping into like animation, like Asajj Ventress by the end of the Clone Wars she's not evil, but she's not really she's not really that evil anymore. The only dark side user other than Palpatine, I feel like, that we get in like modern Star Wars that stays pretty much dark side and evil the whole time is Maul.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's the only one we get, Everybody else has to have a redemption arc. Ben Solo, like I said, Ventress, now Reva. Like, it's like, do we need it, right? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it worked so well for Darth Vader at the end of Return of the Jedi that they just kind of kept repeating it later on and over and over and over again.
Right. All right. Well, at least we all feel the same. Not a terrible character, great actress. No. And I mean, we may see her around in the future. Who knows what they're going to do with that character to keep her around. It is a little sketchy, though, that she knows about Luke and Leia now. So, that information falling into the wrong hands. For me, I just felt like the finale, I felt like him rushing back to try to save Luke, it wasn't needed. But I will say what I think was needed, and they did a good job, is showing that Owen and Beru really do love Luke. When we meet them the last time we see, Owen receiving Luke in Revenge of the Sith, they don't look super excited about it. It's kind of like they didn't ask for this kid, right? They just got.
It's like come on.
Well, I mean, and it's not even
like when you get dropped off at your aunts and uncles, and they're like, "Okay, just come on, did you pack the snacks? Did you pack their bag right? All right, just get in here already." It's like that.
Well, and I mean, he's like not even like blood related. He's like their stepmom's kid, and they knew him for like 10 minutes, and he was kind of a jerk the entire time he was there. So it's not like, you know what I mean?
Right. Like, they don't even have an emotional attachment to Anakin.
Yeah.
And
his girlfriend was nice.
His enabling, murder enabling girlfriend was nice. She was cool.
Yeah.
And then when we meet Beru and Owen in A New Hope, that when we see them the first time, it's like Beru, you can kind of tell, like, she's like, grandma age at that time. So, she loves Luke. But Owen, I mean, I always thought, like, man, that guy's kind of a jerk. He just keeps Luke around to do chores. So it was cool to see both of them were willing to, like, lay their life on the line for Luke. So that they did care for him.
Aunt Beru was going harder than Uncle Ben.
Dude, she pulled those straps out the wall quick, dude.
Dude, I was like, she's down for the cause. Like, sign her up. Put her in the rebellion. Yeah.
And Beru's ride or die, dude. Ride or die. Which means they probably put up a good fight against those stormtroopers in A New Hope. Because
at least.
They were just smoldering husks. You figured they got murdered pretty easy, but my headcanon is they took some stormtroopers down with them.
Because they're like, okay, well, what do we do? And then Beru's like, we've been planning this. Like, we go get the rifle that we've been holding. We go set up shop, and we wait for this girl. Like, Beru was like ready for this. I don't know what else they were thinking was going to happen, but like, I don't know.
And if you want to go with like the whole Ked cannon thing that they like, were ready to go when the stormtroopers came to attack them, there's probably a good shot that they took out a bunch of stormtroopers on their way out, which makes sense why the stormtroopers went hardcore and just burned them, because they were probably just, ticked off by the very end of it and just forget these guys and just waste them.
Yep. Yeah. That's my headcanon, 100%. 100%. I think a good trend like section, I don't know what word I'm trying to think of, but a good segue here would be to talk a little bit about something that I'm having a big problem with in modern, like new Star Wars, is that the Empire, and I'll lump the First Order in with this, right? And it makes more sense to me in the Mandalorian, like post the fall of the Empire. So I'm not so much talking about like Mandalorian and Book of Boba, right? But like stormtroopers are dumb, you guys. Like Obi-Wan walked past a bunch of them with a kid in his cloak, like he was on an episode of Scooby-Doo. Two stormtroopers walk down the hall and he jumps and makes a bunch of noise into like a hidden hallway duct that they don't hear, even though they knew he was there, but he made a force noise, so they go away. He basically took out an entire thing of stormtroopers and those beginning rebel people from the path. Like they weren't even behind cover, and they were able to knock out most of those stormtroopers. And it's like I get it that our main characters need to survive, but let's do it in some kind of plausible ways. I feel like the shows like Rebels and now this, sometimes they make stormtroopers look so dumb. You're like, how does the Empire even how do they even exist? How do they hold anything? I get it, it's sheer numbers, I get it, but every stormtrooper can't be incompetent. And I feel like we get too many examples of just gross incompetence.
Right. I think one thing that I did appreciate was, I don't know if did you see Bad Batch?
Yes. I
do like that, I think it was in the first or second episode of Bad Batch, where they kind of sort of to address it, where they mention that they're moving away from clones and just conscripting just regular people off the planets and forcing them to be part of the Stormtrooper Corps. And so it's the quality of troopers is going down. The guys in the Bad Batch comment on it and mention that. And so I do appreciate them kind of, at least in one aspect, noticing it. But I think there does need to be more acknowledgement of that. I think you're right in that aspect, Nick. I think they need to have more people kind of saying that these guys aren't good soldiers. They're just bodies they shoved into stormtrooper armor to kind of help hold it. And that's why you have your death troopers and your more elite forces, because they're the ones that are actually doing the work.
Right. Yeah. Those guys are the badasses.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even, in Rise of Skywalker, doesn't Finn mention that he was taken as a kid and thrown into the situation? So that explains a little bit of that, of these kids or maybe teenagers and even all the way to adults are just thrown into the situation where they're forced to be part of this regime. And it's it looks good cosmetically when you have hundreds of thousands of troops out there, but are they going to do anything?
Yeah. I just thought it really stood out to me in that scene where they're they breach the door and are I'm just gonna call them the rebels at this point. They're basically the early rebel alliance. They're, some of them are hiding behind things, some of them aren't. Obi-Wan is standing in the middle and just deflecting blaster bolt after blaster bolt, and there's 20 50 stormtroopers, and it's dude, Obi-Wan's a badass Jedi. He's top 5. I get it, but he's also hasn't barely used the Force in a decade.
That was very video game-ish. That was reminding me of of a video game of you're Obi-Wan and you have your lightsaber and you're just button smashing. That's what it reminded me of.
For me, it's so easy to fix that scene. It's right after that scene, they go into a hallway that has a choke point. Wait for them there, and then it makes sense. You know what I mean? But yeah, just little things like that. I think they need to add some validity to. It's a nitpick. It's a nitpick. It didn't ruin the show or anything.
But I'll credit that scene with the Tala scene, Tala and the droid protecting her as she was going out. Like that scene, like I don't know. Even though that droid was just what did they label it as? Like a industrial one,
droid.
Yeah, like a worker one. It showed the emotion of like he was protecting Tala. Like he was willing to give up himself. Like very much similar to K2SO in Rogue One. But
that's exactly what it brought back for me. It was K2SO.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, not again. I can't do this.
Yeah, the emotional strings just get pulled on that stuff like that. It's like they're droids. Like, we're not supposed to feel anything for droids.
That's what I was going to say. They did such a good job. The droid doesn't even speak.
No, that's the crazy thing about it. It's like he's in 1 or 2 episodes and he doesn't speak, but yet we felt so much emotion for him. But,
yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. One thing I will say though is, there's a lot of talk, and I don't feel this way. There's a lot of talk though about how Disney has like ruined Star Wars, right? There's a lot of people out there that feel that way, or Disney has watered down Star Wars. I would argue that the best we've ever seen Darth Vader has been under Disney's banner. Because like, talk about when he walked down that alley or that pathway, dude, he randomly snapped some kid's neck. Like, dude, that was hardcore. That was like Rogue One level, but like amped up. Because at least you watch that hallway scene in Rogue One, it's like, okay, well, these are Rebel Alliance. They're firing on him. They're like they've joined a cause. Like they know what they're there for. These are just some civilians that he just casually force chokes, throws, and murders on the way to find Obi-Wan. All to just try to draw Obi-Wan out. And I thought that was amazing.
Agreed. And I think later on in that same episode where he's just, torturing him by dragging him through fire just cause, like not to kill him, but just cause.
Yeah.
And so, I think it does. It makes it to where at the last fight where Obi-Wan's able to like basically level up and overcome him, I think it makes it stand out even more and makes it to where it reminds me of like an anime where, the main character has been doing a training montage to like level up. And then, he has this one last push with the power of friendship to kind of overcome like the main villain or whatever. And that's kind of like how that ending fight like worked out. I don't think that would have worked as well if Vader was just kind of standing off in the distance, just casually watching as troopers kind of did his work. I think they did a good job getting Vader like down and dirty and actually doing things to make you feel how scary he is.
Yeah, because we definitely don't get a good sense of that in the original trilogy. We're kind of told how scary Vader is. And what we see at the time was amazing, but in hindsight, we just see a clunky dude with a not great lightsaber fight. I mean, the highlight of that series is obviously in Return of the Jedi. Him and Luke's fight is like the best lightsaber scene, and obviously they've changed the way lightsabers like operate and the way fights are after the prequels, but it's been great to see him just like in his prime, basically prime Vader. And let's talk about that end fight between him and Obi-Wan. I thought that was, I'll say it, and I might get flack for it. I actually think that their fight in episode 6 here of the show was better and more emotionally driven than what we got in Revenge of the Sith.
That's tough.
Like, don't get me wrong, Revenge of the Sith is an amazing fight, but to me, the fight in Revenge of the Sith is too drawn out. It lasted longer than I feel like it needed to. The whole like fighting on floating droids in lava, like that was just too over the top. And they were both like, I did love the flashiness of their fight. I think that a lot of people criticized it at the time and still do, that Obi-Wan and Anakin's fight on Mustafar was too flashy with both them like throwing their lightsabers behind their back and stuff. But like Anakin is like prime arrogant at that point, So I think it makes sense. But man, the emotional resonance of this fight, it hit me this time for sure.
I think that's a good observation about the flashiness versus this fight, because you're right, that fight did feel, when they showed the flashback in episode 5 to like Anakin wanting to be like flashy and just attack and just do all these cool moves and everything. You could see that guy in the Revenge of the Sith fight with, the flash and just wanting to just, win and look cool at the same time.
Right.
Versus this one, it felt more like just raw power and emotion. You know what I mean? It was less concerned about like trying to top Maul for like Flash and more just concerned about,
Right.
I'm going to break this person down. And it really kind of sells the line that Obi-Wan had of either him or I are not going to leave this alive, basically. You really do get the sense that, both these guys are kind of tired of toying with each other and they just want this to end. They just want it to stop.
Yeah,
Exactly.
agreed.
I'll make the analogy with Q. He'll probably relate to this. A pro wrestling analogy. Like when Anakin and Obi-Wan fought for the first time, it's almost like they were in the minor leagues. Like both kind of just getting there, like right now in pro wrestling NXT. So these guys are main eventing NXT and they're about to go to the major leagues. When these guys meet for the second time, they've seen things, they've gone through things. They're not the same person that they once were when they first met each other. So you see Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan's damaged. Obi-Wan is he's just still trying to find himself. And for the first time, this is just a few days removed of him learning that Anakin is still alive. Like this is him still just emotionally unstable and trying to figure out, how do I make things right with this guy? Like I ruined his body and he's not the same person. He's a robot. He's a machine of himself. And he says that to Luke in the original saga. He's like, he's just a machine now. And
more machine than man or something like that.
More machine than man. And it falls back to that line. The fact that when you see him and it comes in and out of his voice box in his real voice, which I love the fact that they were able to do
so
that.
Good.
Get James Earl Jones' voice and Hayden Christensen's voice in there at the same time. But you see these guys, and it's just they've gone through the battles. They were a tag team. They were at top of their game. They were about to be two of the most powerful Jedis, and they went their separate ways. And when they come back, they're just trying to end each other, whether that be emotionally or whether that be physically. It's a lot to cover, especially within maybe that fight was 10 minutes at most, and you're cutting back and forth. You're not exactly getting it straight through, but the fact that they were able to tell that story just so beautifully, and the way it ended, some people are going to say, "Oh, well, Obi-Wan just walked away like a chump." No, it's that he knew that he was already dead. Like his friend Anakin was gone. There was nothing more he could actually do to hurt him. He could kill Vader, but what would that do? I mean, obviously in the Empire, but there's already a stronger force above Anakin, or aka Vader, and he knew that was Palpatine. So
I think too.
Go ahead, Q.
I was going to say, I think it also helps. We talk a lot about how this series kind of helps inform like some of the later movies. And I think it helps kind of in a way fix the fight in A New Hope, because, there's been like the complaint about, oh, well, why is that fight so like, boring? Just two old guys waving like sticks at each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that after this, what you now see it as is that Obi-Wan, to use like another like wrestling analogy or like fight analogy, Obi-Wan is 2-0 against Anakin. He's got like nothing to prove. You know what I mean?
Right.
He knows he can take him down at any point that he wants, but he's looking at it more of like the bigger picture of, I need to get Luke off the Death Star and get everybody off of here. So I just need to hold out long enough for them to do that. And then I'm going to take it to the level that Qui-Gon taught me and move on to like the next stage of the Force. You know what I mean? So he doesn't have to necessarily do all this cool stuff to defeat Vader. He knows he can own Vader basically at any point that he wants. He's just looking at like the bigger picture and kind of moving forward. So it kind of helps enhance that fight scene a little bit. And you don't need all that flash now. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then the other thing I wanted to point out, because Rudy was talking about like the voice change and things. There's a lot of talk about like how Deborah Chow did like such a great job in this series and everything. And I think for me, the best subtle piece of work that she did in this entire series is during the fight. Because when you watch Anakin or when you watch Vader talk, And he's talking about what like happened to him and how, you know, this is what you made me, that kind of thing during the fight scene. You'll notice that his lightsaber is, you see Obi-Wan's lightsaber reflecting his face in blue.
Mm-hmm.
And then once he decides that, you know, I am what I am at this point, basically accepting that he is now Darth Vader, the color shifts to his lightsaber in red. And so it's just like that subtle change of like, you know, that it's the end of Anakin basically at that point and the full commitment to Darth Vader. I think that like, you know, that cinematography and that way of shooting it is like, that is like a masterpiece in subtle storytelling through cinematography. And I think Deborah Cho deserves a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, I noticed that like right away and was blown away by it. As he's Anakin, basically, you get that vivid blue lightsaber across his face. And as he tells basically Obi-Wan, like, you didn't kill Anakin like I did. Like now it's like all the red. And for me, you know, you talk about that cinematography, definitely amazing job for her to pick up on that. But we've seen that before used very well in Return of the Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
And when Luke is, you know, being tempted to fall to the dark side, he's like half lit in red, half lit in blue. So we've seen it and I love it because it is subtle. Some people probably won't even pick up on it, but I think that it really drew you in. And I was super excited to see him get his helmet cut open because I was like, get like Hayden's face, you know, like I was excited for that because one of my favorite scenes of all time is when Ahsoka discovers Vader's Anakin in Rebels, and she basically did the same thing. Like Vader goes through a lot of helmets, you guys. And so like I thought that was like a really cool scene, and I was really hoping we'd get it in live action. So I was super excited when we did. But man, I think everybody really did a great job on this show, and I'm glad we got it. There was somebody on TikTok. I saw TikTok the other day that talked about how, you know, as Star Wars fans, we're spoiled, and that's why we can complain about shows not being great or the sequels being terrible or whatever, right? But this guy was like, I was lucky enough to be 9 years old when Star Wars came out, and I watched it in theaters. And he's like, and then you know what happened? The dark times where there was no Star Wars. There was nothing. Like, we watched the first 3 movies, and then there was Star Wars nothing. You had toys, maybe some video games later on, but there was a dark period.
The books held me over for so long.
And then the prequels came out, and then what happened? The dark period, right, where there was no Star Wars. So I was telling Crystal, like, I'd rather have what we've gotten, even the sequels, all right? I'm not a giant fan of those, but there are parts of them that are great, right? And I think that I'm very thankful that we get to get all this Star Wars, you know, that we get to get all these different stories. And I'm super excited that they're not so scared to stop telling the Skywalker story. Like, I don't need it all to be Skywalkers. There's a whole galaxy of people. We can check out some other people, and you know.
I think we'll get that in the Taika movie that he's planning to make.
I think so too.
I think Taika is willing to take that chance and tell a different story because it's a galaxy. Like, there's more than the Skywalkers than in that story. Yeah. Like, let's go explore more and get more characters, more aliens, more droids. Let's get more people involved into this saga.
Yeah,
I was actually thinking about that too because, you know, watching it with my girls, like, and through their eyes, it's very evident from the main, like, first the prequels and the main original trilogy that George Lucas very much wanted it to be the story of like Anakin Skywalker. I mean, it's very like evident. And I think for me, part of the reason why The Mandalorian worked so well and why I think I'm hopeful for some of these other shows is I feel like you get the most out of Star Wars when you treat any member of like the original trilogy or any member of like, you know, one of the main casts, like in that aspect, if you treat them like almost like special guest stars, I guess is the best way to put it. Yeah. You don't necessarily need to have them be the focal point, but like, you know, the ending of Mandalorian season 2 was like a great example. It's like a special guest star does this one thing, gone. Theoretically, we didn't necessarily need to see him in Book of Boba Fett. It's cool. I'm glad we did, but I would have been fine if, like, you know, like in the old school like TV times where like it's sweeps week, so you're going to bring in like Leia for this one episode just to like pop a rating or whatever, and then that she's gone. You know what I mean? I think they work better that way. Yeah.
Yeah. We said in wrestling, when there's a big football game, Vince will call The Rock or Stone Cold to come out on that Monday night just to get that huge pop. And that's granted, you get that special appearance, but like, do we really need it? Yeah. Is it really necessary? Is it going to progress the story? I mean, it did with Grogu to go train with Luke, but necessarily did we need to get there that early? I don't know. The writing, granted, they're doing what they can, and you know that Kathleen Kennedy's telling them like, this is the playbook. Like, we have to make sure we get these characters involved because we're going to make a so-and-so Disney Plus show or another movie in 5 years. So we have to incorporate this or get the seed planted in right now. So it's a lot of that involved as well, probably too.
Well, I definitely hope there's more of that involved because I feel like, and not to fall away from Obi-Wan, but I feel like that was what kind of led to what I feel like happened with the sequels, right? Like, they didn't even tell a cohesive story over 3 movies, whereas now you have Marvel 20 plus movies deep, still able to tell cohesive, interlacing stories because they took the time and thought out where their story's going. Even if they didn't, fully, I don't think they sat down when they started making like Iron Man and in the first, phase 1 movies, they didn't necessarily think, yes, we're going to get to Thanos in a few phases, right? But they were smart enough to keep the first phase interlocking so that they could then explain the next phase, right? Whereas like they couldn't even do that between 3 movies over at Lucasfilm. So hopefully now that we have, Dave Filoni and we have I can't think of John Favreau. Like now that we have these like heavy hitters and now you're bringing in Taika, like I'd love to see more of like not completely the Marvel playbook, but I would like to see at least some of the storytelling brought over, because there are great stories that they can pull from all the legend stuff, because not all of that was great, but some of it was. So, well, we've already been we just hit an hour. So I kind of do want to wrap up. I know we all got some stuff to do today. Real quick, let's just talk about what we're excited down the Star Wars pipeline. So, Q, you go ahead and lead it off. What are you most excited for coming up?
I'm definitely excited for Andor. They were talking that up huge at Celebration, and I will admit, maybe it was just the fact that I was at the convention and with a bunch of Star Wars fans, but hearing as much as they hyped it up during Star Wars Celebration, it did really get me. I'm really excited about it. When I watched Rogue One with the girls for their first time, you can really see a lot of the influence that Rogue One had on the style and feel of The Mandalorian. Mm-hmm. And so I think that it'll kind of slot in really nicely into the way that the current method of Star Wars storytelling. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited for the High Republic stuff, to be perfectly honest. Some of the older tales, because I feel like that has a little bit more. That has a way of kind of touching on not doing Skywalker stuff without having to feel like you're purposely avoiding it. Right. Plus, I do think that some of the issues that some people may have is that they want to see full power Jedi. You know what I mean? And I think that that's your way of doing it without having to have all of the extra baggage that kind of comes along with it, doing it after, during this point in history or later on. You know what I mean? Right. You can get your giant like Jedi battles and stuff with like cool force tricks and everything. Okay. So I think that's something else I'm looking forward to. And to be perfectly honest, I'm really curious about the young adult movie that's coming out with John Watts, who did Homecoming, just because I think that it'll be very interesting to see what style and type of like story they're trying to tell, because I think like, for example, Rebels is a great series from start to finish, and that technically is like a young adult's like story. Right. But I think that the depth of the storytelling in there really works. So I'm kind of excited to see them pull some of that onto like a live action thing. And
he's a great director. So mm-hmm. What about you, Rudy?
Absolutely. Like you, Andor. We're only a few months away from that, and I love Diego Luna and everything he's done, and to bring that character back and to tell a better fleshed out story within they've already said they're creating 2 seasons, and a good chunky amount of episodes per each season. I'm very excited about that. And Mandalorian season 3. I mean, there's all this hype around it. They've different stars of the show have already gone to say this is something that the fans aren't expecting, that it's better than the first 2 seasons. So it's got to live up to that expectation.
Well, and we know they're going back to Mandalore. So, I mean, we're excited for that, right? I mean, to talk about Mandalorian 3, I wasn't at Star Wars at the convention. I wasn't at Celebration, but I did watch the Mandalorian season 3 trailer that leaked from Celebration. Somebody recorded on their cell phone, and it starts up here, and you can see most of it. And then, like, to keep it from security, the phone slowly comes down. And by the end of the trailer, you see like a sliver, like a diagonal sliver of the trailer. But even watching that little bit, I was like super hyped. But I think for me personally, Ahsoka's my favorite Star Wars character. And so I am most excited for the Ahsoka series. I'm interested to see where they're going to pick up the story from Rebels, which, you know, it really looked like from like all the stuff they're doing, everything that came out from Celebrations, it looks like Ahsoka's going to pick up pretty much right from where maybe Rebels left off.
Well, especially because they like cast Sabine and everything, so it does seem like they're really trying to pull from that like last season. So yeah.
And supposedly Hayden Christensen is also cast to be in that show. So I don't know if he's going to show up as Vader or if we're going to get flashbacks with him and Ahsoka, which, you know, we've never seen them together in live action. So that could be, I mean, I kind of hope for flashbacks, though I will say, and I know we're at the end of our time here, I'm hoping they do a little de-aging on Anakin in any future flashbacks, because it was a little weird to see like middle-aged Anakin taking down like Padawans in the temple. So I wouldn't mind a little de-aging, you know, like kick it up to like 10%, you know?
Yeah. Although it was scary to basically see like, you know, somebody's dad come in and like killing kids. It was like that kind of like made it more freaky a little bit. You know what I mean?
But yeah, I think that we have a lot of good stuff. And you guys already talked about Andor. I was not like stoked for that movie, that show at all. But after watching the trailer, now I'm like, I feel the hype. So I think it's going to be really cool. And one of the most interesting parts for me about Rogue One's actually my second favorite Star Wars movie of all time. In one of the interesting things for me about that movie was always that, like, you know, when in modern history, when you think of like rebellions, right, we kind of associate it with like terrorists, right? Because, you know, I'm not going to say we live in a country where we're the empire, right? But normally when you talk about rebels, it's a faction that's rising against a like standard government that's already been established, right? And so it's always interesting to see the rebels be a little bit more gray area, like they would have to be to start to like win against the Empire. Like they're probably doing some shady guerrilla warfare in the beginning. And like, I want to see that in Star Wars. I like seeing the grittiness that we got in Rogue One and some of the grittiness we got in some of the early parts of Solo when he was still in like the Imperial Army. So
yeah, I think too, like, you know, they touch on it quite a bit during like the beginning of Rogue One with like, his mission isn't what he says he's supposed to do. He's basically like an assassin for all intents and purposes. Right. And so I think that, you know, it does seem to like tie in a lot with that. Plus, like, you know, Saw Gerrera in like Clone Wars and everything. I think that there's probably going to be more of that style of stuff than like, you know, the bright and shiny, you know, Rebel Alliance that we kind of know from the movies. I'm hoping we get some Saw Gerrera in this series. Like, he would be around pretty much in this time, you know. I mean, I'll take a Saw Gerrera series too, personally. I love the character. I love the idea. Give me him after Clone Wars and somewhere between then and, you know, obviously he doesn't make it past Rogue One, but you know, so.
You know who I think would probably might show up in this show, and he kind of gives a wink at the end of his scene, is Ice Cube's son's character, Roken.
Oh yeah.
He goes, I'm just getting started. And he gives you that.
Like,
you're showing up somewhere, but I don't know where you're showing up. I love this character. His character's awesome.
I thought the same thing. He was like, I'm just getting started. I was like, oh, where are we going to see him next? I wonder. Yeah. You know,
it was almost like that thing, you know, in the comics where they have like a little asterisk of like, follow his adventures in blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. It's like at the end of a Marvel movie where it's like, Iron Man will return, and it's like whatever his character's name was, you know. So
Yeah.
and when he popped up on screen, I was like, oh, he's just noticeable enough to come back, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be cool. Well, I really appreciate you guys taking the time to come hang out and chat with us today. And, you know, hopefully we'll do more of these as different shows and stuff come out. But yeah, I really appreciate it. So thank you guys so much.
Yeah, of course. Happy to do it.
Anytime.
All right. Until next time, we'll see you guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Wrong show.